The Castro regime in Cuba has been celebrating its 10th anniversary this weekend. It's 10 years since an unknown and fanatical lawyer, Fidel Castro, led an armed band against a Cuban army fort. And in those 10 years, Castro has moved more and more snugly into the arms of Soviet Russia. This film story by James Mossman is the first detailed television report to come from Castro's Cuba since the discovery there last year of nuclear rocket sites precipitated a world crisis. The report begins in Havana.
Everyone to the plaza with Fidel on the 26th. The cries of the propaganda van reinforced the message plastered over Havana for the past 3 weeks. 500,000 Cubans answered the call. Revolution Square on the 26th combined bank holiday high spirits with the cumulus thoroughness of a communist rally. A facade of posters at Havana Airport on the day before the rally had greeted the last contingents of foreign visitors. Armed soldiers watched the crowd while others lined up for a salute. Castro himself was on hand to meet Algeria's war minister Boumedienne. He joked with his cronies with camera-conscious gestures. Boumedienne was an important catch for Castro, who had his first public kiss. Castro wanted more than just communists to be present. He's anxious to assert the normality of Cuban life by gaining recognition and support from abroad. Castro has been flirting recently with the British, French and other Western embassies in Havana. Our revolution is permanent and it's serious, he has assured them. The top foreigner, of course, is Nikita Khrushchev. His portrait shares pride of place with that of Fidel, who depends on him utterly to protect him from the Americans. Women militia in ill-fitting khaki uniforms brandish rifles and help to sustain the revolutionary key. They take it in turns to guard their places of work. Their trousers are conspicuous for the zips up the back. They say that some of these women are pretty good shots by now. Others, it seems, would be emotionally incapable ever of pulling the trigger. At Sloppy Joe's bar, there are no women in uniform. Indeed, there are no customers at all. Nothing illustrates the death of American influence better than this graveyard of Yankee tourism. 5 years ago, it was full of Hollywood film stars and rum-happy trippers from New York. Now, the Russian sailors pass it by as they tour the red light quarter. Photographs of Alec Guinness and Noel Coward stare through the murky glass. Outside, yet more posters sustain public indignation against the United States government. As the bold Cuban worker flings a spear, the man who is ducking for his life on the right is poor President Kennedy of the United States. The empty American embassy, guarded by the Swiss, was nationalized whilst I was there. The Cubans breached international law because they said they were provoked. At the end of streets, Russian cargo ships replace American ones in the docks. They bring food and raw materials to fill a fraction of the gap left by the American blockade. Russians have replaced Americans in the streets of the old city. They behave like a good many tourists. Khrushchev has dismantled his rockets, but he keeps over 20,000 men in Cuba as advisors, teachers and military technicians. Slowly, Havana is breaking down. Cars, air conditioners, lifts and water mains were all American. There are no spare parts. The Soviet bloc cannot or will not refurbish the city. Those who suffer most, of course, are the middle class, whom Castro contemptuously calls the worms. A third of the city's bus fleet is off the road. Czech buses like this Skoda are doing the work of 3. So are Leyland buses and old General Motors ones. Yet, as the cars die out, more people than ever will have to travel this way to get to their work or to the dreary, half-empty shops and supermarkets. You have to shop for food pretty early to get anything like enough for a meal. Most basic food is rationed. and by noon, almost everything else has gone. Before the revolution, Cuba relied on imported American food. Now she must try to be self-sufficient. I found there was hardly anything worth buying. A few slices of meat a month are the ration. There's no green vegetables at this time of year. Milk is reserved for children, and I never saw an egg for the fortnight I was there. The ration book has become as precious as it was in wartime Britain. It means life or death, and it can be removed from those who displease the regime. People complained boldly to me about their dislike of the communists and their hard times, but they were usually middle class and middle-aged. No one complained about their loss of liberty, only about their empty stomachs. At night, the most popular attraction was a bizarre Cuban sausage exhibition at the Czech Pavilion. Cubans of all classes waited for hours to get in. Inside, they shuffled along in eager anticipation. Some young men took time out from the queue to ask me about England. The excitement of the evening was that after being lectured about the machinery, you had the chance to get at the sausages themselves. After feasting your eyes on them, you went outside to little booths where you could buy hamburgers of unrationed meat. In the few smart restaurants left, the new privileged class and the remnants of the old rich pay 21 shillings for a hamburger like this. My hotel was the famous Habana Hilton, now the Habana Libre. It was garnished outside with a ponderous electric peace dove. Inside, you found the working class, stumping about the lobby with a sense of exhilaration. The hotel is run down and the food disgusting. The new clients have made it almost as dreary as their former haunts must have been. But the novelty hasn't yet worn off for them. Castro has given them a new sense of status, and he can trade on it for some time to come. Havana City is old, and it's hard to efface its diversity and character, though the communists who hate diversity are doing their best. Stakhanovite cane cutters have money in their pockets as well as medals on their breasts. But though there's more money going around, there's far less to buy. The fact that a shop has been nationalized hardly helps the woman who wants nylons or a bottle of aspirins. For these, she must go to the black market. Castro has eliminated unemployment, but few people have a higher standard of living than before, and many have less. One shop does a roaring trade every week in making plastic covers to enshrine your identity card. In a country where you need a permit for everything, plastic is the rage. There's the absurd pathos of people trying to keep a little color in their lives. A few draggled flowers constitutes a day's sale. Next door, a Picasso-like dove waits for a buyer. Is there a communist law, one wonders, against cooking a peace dove for dinner? When the shopkeepers have nothing to sell, they put Castro in the window, though unfortunately he can't be bought. Spectacles, it seems, are worn by the very best people. Cubans are natural optimists and make light of their failures, which in a way that is the despair of their Soviet advisors. Castro has great difficulty in making them act on his injunction to work harder. I might as well not speak to you, he said recently. It just goes in one ear and out the other. Councils to defend the revolution watch out for people who deviate too far. These are the block wardens who savor the crude pleasure of having power over their neighbors. Arise, ye starvelings, from your slumbers. The words of the International seem apt for those working on Cuba's much vaunted cooperative farms. So far, they've been privileged but unproductive. Families of workers live in nice new houses. Many of the men used to work on the great sugar plantations. Now that they have these plum jobs, there's a seasonal labor dearth in sugar. The co-ops have failed to help feed Cuba. because they take life too easy. But for Castro, they've been a political asset and won him friends among the landless peasants. In the dusty main street of Pedro Betancourt, you find the many kinds of farmer that Castro contends with. The easygoing Cooperativo rubs shoulders with some of the 100,000 peasants whom Castro has given land. A government official told me that only education would raise farming standards enough. In the cafes, you find the private owner farmers. They own over half of Cuba's farmland. They are sick of communist officials whose malice and stupidity drove them to near revolt in 1962. The private farmer like these is the backbone of food production, which the communists nearly broke. The farmers resented the state trying to take their produce and make them join co-ops. They began to underplant and to kill their cattle. Castro partly gave in. Now they can sell everything privately except tobacco, sugar and rice. It's boys like these, singing the International at the agriculture school, that Castro relies on to bring socialism to the land. Education is Castro's method of making the revolution stick. This rich man's mansion has been taken over to house students of music. Most of the children are working class. They live in the building, charming the air with playing and singing. And like all Cuban students, they have Marxist-Leninist indoctrination classes every day. The girls are pretty and happy. For them, the revolution was great. Castro is an adored pin-up. Out of politeness to us, they sang in English a ballad called April Smiles in My Mistress' Eyes. Youth is behind Fidel Castro. For these boys doing cadet training, he is the revolution, and the revolution is Cuba. In time, Castro will have to produce the goods to prove his revolution. Meantime, he can count on the goodwill of the young. Their attitude confirms your impression that Castro's revolution is here to stay. In the plaza 3 days ago, 500,000 Cubans attested that the revolution is still intimately linked in their minds to the personality of their leader. Marxist-Leninism comes second, which is the way that Castro likes it.
Señores miembros de las delegaciones amigas que nos visitan.
The leaders postured proudly above the crowd. Chinese communist generals stared about expressionlessly like figures from an Orwellian nightmare. The leaders basked in their power. The masses, a word favored by communists, participated eagerly in the degrading spectacle. Russians as well as Chinese were prominent. Castro talked for 3 hours, 12 minutes. He attacked America, most of Latin America, and called for friendship with other Western powers and demanded more production. The people cheered most about production and not about liberty, which few have ever known, either now or before. Castro has torn Cuba up by the roots and stood it on its head. To do this, perhaps he had to embrace communism. For despite a few Latin American deviations, his is the voice of communism. As such, his continued existence is a victory for the East and a defeat for the West.